Oh, Matt Hammerker's on too, man.
Mr. McDonough, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, guys. I'm going to give, just if you guys don't mind, just a couple more minutes. Let everybody kind of have time to join. We'll start maybe 2-3 minutes after the hour. And we'll, like usual, you know, we'll just jump right into it and try not to take the full hour and leave the last part for any questions or anything else you want to talk about.
Everybody logging on, if you cannot see the screen, let us know, but everybody should be seeing the front slide of the presentation right now.
All right, man. It looks a good number of people are joining, so that's good. Lou, I can already tell from the people joining, when we open it up for questions, just get ready, buddy.
I think most of them know Lou, so.
Oh, wait a minute. Some of these guys may know more than I do. I mean, I've worked with them for years, so.
Yeah, they know.
Yeah. As long as Walter don't give me a hard time, I'm okay.
Yeah, that guy's a jerk.
There's Walter.
I second that motion.
He's got that New York, Texas accent. That's Walter.
Hey, Walter, this is Al. Give me a call when you get off the WebEx. I'm going to be in town next weekend.
Oh, really? Great. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I'll get your number from Jeff. I mean, from Stephen.
Okay. Steve.
Yeah, so everybody on the call, what Al's talking about is actually, everybody should know Frank Biola. If not, he's been with NEC for 30-plus years, has been a leader for NEC for a long time, mainly around the marketing arena. But he started a show last year, a car show in honor of his son, Alex Biola, who was killed in Afghanistan. And it was a huge turnout last year. And by the looks of it, this year, which is going to be next weekend, it's going to be huge.
Next Saturday. Yep.
Yeah, next Saturday, the 5th. If anybody wants any information on that, just shoot me an email. I'll get it to you. But it is going to be a huge event.
I'm bringing up my
Hey, Stephen, don't forget about my presence Friday at NEC.
Oh, yeah, you're going to be in town. Man, I am so busy that day.
I know.
I'm just joking. All right, well, we're about 4 minutes after the hour. It looks like a few more people are kind of joining in, but let's go ahead and kick this off. Reggie, if you don't mind, just so everybody knows, I record these sessions and I put them on our website, okay? And so if you ever have any troubles finding it, let me know, but go to our main website and go under, I should say webinars, under news and events. All of these sessions we've done over the last several months are on there, so you can go watch them at any time, okay? So I'll probably repeat that when we start recording. So, Reggie, you want to go ahead and...
It's on.
What's that?
It's on, active already.
Okay, all right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. As promised, several months ago, we started doing these webinars. I've known a lot of you for many years, and you know, I just felt like it was important to have a monthly kind of what I'm calling kind of technology overview. We pick a different topic every month. So far, we did an in-depth SV9500 complete overview. We've done the NEC biometric solution overview. We did the SDN servers and storage. And then we also had one that was Smart Enterprise, which really talked about NEC as a complete whole. site, check them out. They're recorded. Download them. If you have any problems, you can always call me. All right. So today we're going to do, after talking to a few of you, we kind of wanted to revisit the SV9500 redundancy options now. Okay. So Lou Fulco with NEC, sales engineer, everyone probably knows him, is going to dig into that. We're also going to look into the virtualization options within the SV9500 and maybe the high level and the applications. Pretty much all the applications can be virtualized now. And then we're going to talk high level on the migration options on the UG50. So, you know, there's a lot of you that have SV8300s or 9300s hanging off of your SV9500 system. We're going to show you an option. Instead of going with that system, you can go to a UG50, and there's a migration option to do that. All right? So that's today. We're going to dig into that a little bit. So there's the agenda. I got one slide on Forerunner. I do that for every one of these. And then we're going to dig right into what we're here for, and that's, you know, a little glimpse into exactly the virtualization, redundancy, and the options. All right? Let's go ahead and go, Lou, if you don't mind. So Forerunner, you know, founded in 1988. Look, I put some bullets up here. Our philosophy is simple. Customer satisfaction is our main priority, and I believe a lot of you on this call, probably all of you, would agree with that and back up that statement, right? I put a comment in there from NEC. Forerunner is an NEC Triple Diamond partner, and there's a quote in there from Larry Levenberg about who we are and what we do. We're an exclusive NEC partner, national dealer. There are a couple of new points that I want to bring up that aren't on the slide, okay? So Forerunner is NEC's fastest growing NEC partner, okay? We've added over 1,000 customers just in 2016 alone, all right? We are the first to do and implement the SV9500 virtualized system. All right. We're also the first to sell and install a smart enterprise solution, which is NEC Voice, NEC Servers, and NEC software-defined networking solution. All right. So a lot of experience, a fast-growing company. We're adding people every day, and we're adding customers every day. All right. So our commitment to you is simple. What I'd like to be for you is your trusted advisor. All right. I want you to call me. I'll help you with configurations. I'll, you know, of course, show you all the new information like I'm doing with these webinars. But that's pretty much it. That's Forerunner. If you have any more questions on Forerunner or what we do, our experience, or even maybe you want to talk to another customer that's doing the same thing that you're wanting to do, okay? So please just reach out to me anytime. That's it on Forerunner. Lou, next slide. I'm going to pass this over to Lou. These webinars, I like to keep them, you know, your time is valuable. I know you only have an hour or so, so let's just dig right into the solution and what we're here for.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Stephen, and good morning, everyone. Again, my name's Lou Fulco. We've been with NEC almost 30 years now, and as you know, the technology has really changed in the first few past decades. So what I'm going to go over again is the 9500 and the resiliency and continuity that we can offer. And of course, as you've seen earlier on one of our previous sessions, we build this all over the Smart Enterprise. And when we talk about the Smart Enterprise, the solution has to be simple, it has to be scalable, everyone has to have a unified experience, whether you're in an IP terminal, digital terminal. But the main crux of it is you got to have a smart infrastructure. That's the foundation layer. The infrastructure has to be there to be able to provide 100% or 99.999% telephony services, application services. So the infrastructure is very important, and we'll be talking about those. The four pillars of our enterprise, our smart enterprise, of course, is four things. Cloud delivery, with data centers, which is going to fall into our discussion today with redundancy and failover. A lot of companies, a lot of enterprises are building data centers, whether they be, on campus or across the country. That's being very important, and the 9500 plays well into that. mobility. With the business agility, mobility, everybody now has, iPhones, Samsung devices, tablets, being able to take that device and make it part of your enterprise. A lot of solutions with the NEC product line. Of course, the UC element, the collaborative communities, being able to share information, instant messaging. But what we're here for is the assured services, right? To be able to give you the business continuity ensured by highly available IT infrastructure. So speaking of that, NEC, part of our Smart Enterprise Solutions is IT products and solutions. And just real quickly, just going to kind of touch just on one or two slides on what we do offer on the IT side of the house, which, again, you'll see how that plays into the 9500 delivery solution, from the backup to server storage and the disaster recovery. As far as servers, NEC manufactures and supports general purpose servers, anything from a 1U, 2U to even a liquid cooled server, tower server that doesn't even have fans in it for dusty heat environment, or environments that are very dusty or maybe need a quiet environment. We do offer those solutions. We'll talk a little bit in depth on the fault tolerance. That's NEC's unique redundant fault tolerant server. Even NEC even makes enterprise class servers. They can do up to 44 servers in the 3U form factor. With virtualization, of course, storage is very important. With the VMware, being able to have your OVA files stored on the storage. Again, NEC manufactures M-Series for the storage, and our award-winning Hydra Store for the backup of those storage. And we're also a leader in the software-defined networks, as far as the new network technology, being able to deliver efficient, secure networking protocols over our programmable flow. And we'll talk a little bit about also our Express cluster software and how that plays into the UC element. So 9500, to begin with, we got to have a smart enterprise architecture to be able to deliver redundancy and failover and continuity. So that's what we're going to be talking about with the 9500. Now, there are a lot of terms out there, especially I see a lot of RFPs, and a lot of customers says, oh, I need a redundant system, right, or I need a failover system. Well, what does that mean? What do you really need? Are you talking about a backup, or you just need a backup, your database onto a server somewhere, or are you talking about full redundancy or a failover? Doesn't it be survivable? What about disaster recovery when the whole campus goes away? What about that? So those are the things you got to think about, and what are the expectations, right? Are you talking about a full recovery, or just give me dial tone? Have a PRI available for me to make and receive calls is fine. What about local survivability? So all those things come into play when you start designing a redundant failover system. The main crux of it, again, is what is your network topology? How are your data centers? If you're going to use two data centers, are they connected with a 10 gig fast speed fiber connection, or do you have a D-Link and run it over a 9600 modem? That does come into play. So another thing is, are you have a virtualized or a VMware, Hyper-V initiative? Are you trying to virtualize all your applications, including your telephony now? So that comes into play as well. As what pieces of that do you need? Of course, the applications. Got to think about the applications. How much of that needs to be redundant and fail over? And some things that customers don't think about is what about the carrier service? Where I'm getting my local dial tone. Can I reroute those calls? If a location goes away, I need to reroute my incoming calls to another location. Can the carrier do that? Can you do that? Specifically with SIP, that makes it a lot easier nowadays to be able to reroute with SIP trunking. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So, of course, as you know, the 9500 is an all-in-one scalable UC platform. And with that, what we mean is we've always had our UC applications for a while now being able to be virtualized in a virtual environment. With the introduction of the 9500, we now been using the telephony side in a VMware environment. So now you're able to virtualize the whole UC experience, from the 9500 to the UCE applications, to the call center, ACD, PC-based operators, all that in a single platform, single VMware instance if you want to. So that's the beauty of the 9500. And with that, the advantages now is that does make the 9500 data center ready. And with NEC, we're always about options, right? Always about choices. We can allow that 9500 to run on a standard, server, a 1U, 2U server with VMware, or you can actually, keep it purpose-built, keep it with the 3U appliance base, where, some customer says, I want that telephony tried and true on a purpose-built appliance, but I'm okay virtualizing all my other applications. Again, we give you that choice to do that. So it ties into your corporate, Active Directory infrastructure with our MA4000 or UCE Manager tool to be able to synchronize with Active Directory for management. So, a lot of those things now are, when you start talking about the 9500 and its advantages, you can see how it fits into an IT data center environment.
Hey, Lou, one question
Yes.
on the operating system, the server. What are the choices there?
Well, if you're going to run, VMware, of course, run on a Microsoft backplane with the VMware instance. Now, we still have the SV9500 is still a Linux kernel that's loaded, so we basically give you an OVA file to run that on.
So if you run it on a server, it's going to be Microsoft operating system.
Right, to load the VM. Right, because you got you have the UC elements as well, right? The UCE, the UM8700, those things also run on the Microsoft. So you basically, you're going to spin up some VMware instances to run those applications on.
Okay. The only reason why I mention that is because every month they do patching here, and so we'd be putting the phone system in a monthly patching environment.
Right. But, and again, that's why we give you the choices of kind of what we're talking about next, right? The 3 delivery models. If you want to keep the 9500 in an appliance model, you can still do that. You say, you know what, I'm okay with the 9500 being on the 3U purpose-built appliance, but everything else could be in a software environment. And that's a good lead into that as far as the NEC being able to support all 3 models, again, gives you the customer choices, right? With the software model, it's just that we basically the technicians would download a VMware instance, the OVA files, you load it into your own VMware environment, or we can do a prepackaged model where NEC will sell you the servers, whether you do a VMware high availability or our NEC fault tolerant we'll talk about, preloaded with the applications, preloaded with the software, the OS is all loaded on a server or a couple servers depending on which way you go. So again, you do have different options for that. And this is kind of, more architecture what we're talking about. So if you do have the system on a VMware environment, again, you're just going to load the UC and 9500 on a VMware instance, deploy out your IP terminals. And then, again, anything that you need TDM, we still offer TDM integrations via what we call the UG50 that we'll talk about here in a minute, but being able to take analog or digital or PRI, calls or trunking in the TDM world through that UG50. Now, again, with the appliance model, we can go one step further. If you go that route, we can actually put the GCs or gateway chassis, the high-density 7U or 8U chassis to get you a lot more density, for heavy TDM environments, maybe some hospitals, universities that may have a lot of analogs. We can still deploy that through the appliance model. And that's typically what you'll see also when we do these migrations. So, speaking of the appliances, kind of, what Walter was asking about with the appliance version, it's still probably what you guys are familiar with, the 3U chassis, with the 9500 running the telephony services, and then being able to load your choice again, the UC elements, the voicemails, the unified messaging, all the other applications on a virtualized environment or on a server as we have been doing. Now for the TDM, the digital type stuff, analog type stuff, you still have the capability of doing a gateway, with the UG50s and or hybrid in it or mixing with the GC, with the general purpose or the GC server, the PIM. I keep on thinking old school, the PIM. Gateway chip. Yes, sir.
With the UG50 hardware, what are my options from an NFAS standpoint?
That I will have to ask. I do not know.
Okay.
I'll have to find out if we can do it. Yes.
Yeah, because we got like 5 spans and 1 D channel. I've got a mix of anywhere between 5 to a standalone. 5, so
correct.
Just curious about.
No, that's a good question. Now, you know what? Now, the product manager is not. I don't think he was going to try to join us here, Mark, but I don't think he was able to join us yet. If he gets on later on, we'll find. Oh, may I ask him that question? But if not, I'll definitely find that out for you. That's a good question.
No problem.
No worries. No, thanks. No problem. That's no worries. So again, if we do the prepackaged version, what we're going to be able to do is we're going to deliver the services on a general purpose server or the NEC fault tolerance server that we'll talk about here in a minute. Now, being VMware software based only, of course, there's no gateway chassis or GC chassis. So in order to get the TDM connections, the analogs and PRIs, you will use what we call the UG50. We'll talk about here in a minute. But again, what we do is load all those applications onto a VMware ESXi host server and then deploy the services from there. And simply, of course, the software model is just that. Here's your software loaded into your own VMware environment. Now, one thing I do want to talk about, which does fall into redundancy and failover, is SIP trunking. With the prevalence of SIP trunking coming out nowadays, NEC has always had the appliance-based. You guys are probably familiar with the MG SIP, the 128 MG SIP, purpose-built appliance, or maybe the 16-port blades for the SIP trunking. Well, with introduction 9500, we now are able to do VMware. We're able to virtualize that the SIP trunking software. So again, that could just be an instance on a VMware machine, a virtual machine. And the beauty of that is that you license on a per channel basis. Instead of if you guys needed 72 channels of SIP trunking, you'd have to have a 128 box that gave you all 128, whether you need it or not. With this capability, you can now buy just what you need, load it up on a VMware instance, and use it. And more importantly, being able to put that VMware instance wherever you need it. If you got multiple sites, you can have 5 channels here, 5 channels here, and 60 channels at the main site. And again, the beauty of that is it doesn't matter whether you're a 9500 appliance-based or virtualized, because the SIP trunking piece is virtualized. Now, you can't load the virtual SIP trunking on a 9500 appliance. You still have to have a VMware instance for that. But I just wanted to mention that because that's something that's pretty new, and a lot of customers don't know about that yet. So let's talk about what we're here for, redundancy and failover. Typically when we talk about redundancy, that's on-premise redundancy. We're talking about dual CPUs, dual memories, dual hard drives, dual power supplies, where in a virtual environment, VMware high availability comes into play. Failover is just that. I'm going to fail over from one data center to another data center, or it could also mean fail over to a local, to a local instance somewhere. So we'll talk about both of those. And typically, in the 9500 network, where you're going to see redundancy is probably at the corporate location, right? At the main facilities, the main hospital, the main university location, you're going to want redundancy, whether it's the appliance base that we've always had, or maybe a virtual, VMware, or with our fault tolerance system. And then when we talk about failover, typically that means, on campus you have another data center, maybe across the, the campus that has a high-speed data network connection that I want to fail over to another 9500, and we'll talk about that. Survivability typically means a branch locations, where you have a branch location with 50, 60 users, maybe a local PRI there, and if you lose that connection, I want to be locally survivable. We'll talk about those. And of course, remote locations may just mean simply just give me some dial tone from 911 and I'm good with that. And of course, we got to think about the carrier backup, as we talked about earlier, being able to maybe fail over from SIP to PRI or what have you. So local survivability. To do local survivability, when we talk about the UG50, right, that's our 2U appliance that will terminate IP on one end, talking to the 9500, and then your digital phones, analog phones, or PRIs through some blades on the UG50. Again, that's available for both the appliance model or the virtualized model. It doesn't matter. We'll talk about the survivability capability of this UG50. But again, that's what this does, right? It gives you that capability to terminate TDM devices into a IP network. And as Stephen mentioned earlier, we have a lot of customers with our CCIS technology, where you may have an 85 or 9500 using what's called IP CCIS to be able to do 4-digit dialing, centralized voicemail, maybe centralized call accounting. A lot of centralized services, but not 100%, maybe 30, 40, 50% feature transparencies. So, with that environment, you also have, different databases. I mean, the 8300 has its own database. You know, these two sites would have their own database, the 9500 all database. You can still manage it, you know, with the UCE manager or the MA4000, but it is, you know, 3 different databases and, you know, some feature transparencies that aren't there. So the beauty of what a UG50 does is if you convert that to a UG50 environment, then that becomes a single system image, and all those users now become, you know, a 9500 user. So to convert a UG50 to a, an 8300 to a UG50, pretty simply what you do, you take away the 1U CPU that the 8300s have, because you don't need that anymore. All that's doing is, you know, running 8300 software and solutions. And you're going to deploy or insert in that very first slot, as long as that first slot is available up there at the top, you're going to put in the UG50 CPU. Okay, what that does is that has the 9500 software in it that downloads, you know, the database from the main mothership 9500. Once you've got that in place, then all you simply do is reassign those users that were there on that 8300 into the 9500 database, right? Any IP users, any analog stations, digital stations, PRIs, what have you, program that into the 9500, and now you've become, you know, basically a single system image system with, you know, reconverting or redeploying those 8300s and making them into a UG50. So we're seeing a lot of that. A lot of customers are going that route just to give it all into a one single system image deployment. So basically what we, you know, did to allow for that, NEC came up with what's called a UG50 conversion kit. Basically it's the CPU, the pad card that goes in there, a memory, you know, as far as the hardware goes, into one single stock number. Here's the part that you need to convert that 8300 to a UG50. And then, of course, you just need licensing right on the 9500, a user license for the IP stations that are there, a user license for any D-term analog ports, and then a trunk license for, you know, per trunk port or PRI channel. Does that kind of make sense for you guys? I knew that was something that a lot of customers were asking for. So as far as survivability, you know, with the UG50, and it's kind of what we're talking about, the local survivability, it's called the, you know, the SR-MGC application. So basically in this environment, you have a branch location running IP phones, running a UG50 with its TDM terminations. As long as the connection's up and normal, you know, running, no issues, you're talking back to the 9500 main. But if you lose that connection, what happens is the survivable media gateway controller, the SRMGC application, kicks in. All the IP phones re-register with that local survivable gateway connection, as well as the UG50. And at least now you have, you know, local dial tone, local in and out calls going through there. Of course, any services that are provided from the 9500 that you don't have a connection to are lost. But that's what the SRMGC does. And it does, there's 3 options now for hardware, and there's actually a virtualized option. So if you wanted to run the SRMGC software, you can either, you know, buy it in a 3U chassis. I mean, you can actually redeploy the CPO2s and make it a SRMGC unit if you want. We offer the 1.5U chassis, you know, for the bigger environments where, you know, up to 2,000 ports of survivability. What we just introduced also not too long ago is the UG50 Blade. It's kind of it's a CPU card that goes inside that same 2U chassis, and it comes with 50 ports of survivability. Then can grow to 300. So we're seeing a lot of that. You know, again, for some smaller environments where there may be, you know, 50 to 60 users with a PRI, and you want to make it survivable, you load that card in there. And the beauty of the way we're doing the survivability now, or the SRMGC software, it's purchased on a per port basis. You know, previously with the 8500s, you'd have to buy a 100 port, a 200 port, you know, 300 port survivable in, you know, buckets of 100. Well, now you can do it on a per port basis. So it makes it, you know, less expensive for you guys to be able to deploy survivable locations. And of course, like I said, the VMware option is also available. We can actually load it up on a VMware instance. Okay, so redundancy, right? So now we talked about local survivability. Redundancy is just that. You know, I'm going to have dual memories, dual CPUs, dual power. NEC's always been strong, you know, from the 2400 days, 8500 days, even now the 9500 days, being able to, in the appliance version, have dual CPUs, parallel operation, you know, the actual time switching, your speech paths, everything is actually running in dual parallel, you know, bus on the back of that plane. So if you lose one system, it's a hot standby. I mean, it kicks over and you're, you know, keep rocking and rolling. the nice thing about that also is a lot of the components are you know, hot swappable with zero downtime, which is very important. If you do lose a node or an CPU or something, you can hot swap them on there. So the appliance-based redundancy always been tried and true. You know, and a lot of you guys are familiar with that. When we talk about software now, there's, you know, software brings a different solution to the table. You know, whether you're being VMware or the NEC's fault tolerant. NEC, this is unique. You know, if in a virtualized environment, NEC makes the FT server, and again, it's NEC only. And the beauty of that is that it gives you the 5 nines of reliability, and you actually have 2 servers in one. All the applications, Microsoft licensing, all that stuff still looks at it as a single server, but you have what's called lockstep. The CPUs are, you know, talking to each other at the exact same time. The memories, the power, all that stuff is sitting in 2. It's a 4U chassis box with actually 2 servers in one. So the beauty of that is that it's the same as kind of like the appliance backup model. You know, 0 data loss. If you lose a CPU, the other one's already running. If you lose a power supply, the other one's already running. So it's you know, very strong in its redundancy. As a matter of fact, a lot of like the New York Port Authority, some of those, a lot of government agencies are using this server just because it gives you that 5 nines out of the box. Of course, if you want to go, you know, I'm sorry, this is just what we do offer as well. As far as the fault tolerant, you know, we do have 2 models, one for the business and one for hotels. But basically, we're loading all the applications on that fault tolerant server, and the voicemail is the only difference. Now, if you want to go VMware high availability, now with VMware HA solution, of course, what you have there is, you know, 2 servers, 2 ESXi host servers, and you got to have storage, right? So with the storage solution, you know, NEC can offer you the M series. That's actually where your hard disks are, right? Those 2 servers, those ESXi servers, are actually using that storage as its hard disk. So what happens is if VMware, you know, the primary is up and running, and for whatever reason, if you lose that, the storage or the other VMware ESXi host recognizes that, and, you know, all the applications, the virtual machine images, all the database, everything gets you know, used by the secondary one. So, you know, that's, again, a lot of customers go with the VMware high availability because they have that, they understand the VMware solution, they're okay with that, and that is one of our prepackaged solutions. Now, I just want to throw this up that, you know, there is differences between the 2. If you go with the VMware high availability, of course, you know, you realize there's a lot of servers, a lot of components required, right? I mean, yes, you do you know, you're able to split the 2 EXI servers. You're going to have a storage array. You're going to have a fiber channel switch to, you know, for high availability of the database. You're going to have a vCenter server to manage all that. So, you know, there are a lot of components and stuff available or used with the HA, as opposed to the NEC fault tolerant. You know, if you go with the fault tolerant to give you that redundancy, then that eliminates a lot of stuff. Eliminates the clustering, eliminates the, you know, the multiple servers that you might need, and more importantly, you know, as far as licensing goes, again, it looks to the applications as a single server, so it makes it, you know, less costly to be able to deploy the software on that. So let's talk about failover, right? So failover is just that, failing over. Typically, you got a, you know, a headquarters location with the primary 9500 voicemail running, applications, users running, and maybe a standby site or remote site that may happen. Maybe typically could be another data center, you know, on campus or another location on campus. So what you have is a 9500, say in this example, sitting there in a standby mode. So if something would happen to the 9500, you know, application at the main primary, the secondary one kicks in and takes over, you know, all the IP phones and things that weren't registered up to the primary gets re-registered to the secondary one, and that secondary one basically becomes the primary and starts taking over the network. So that's what we mean by mission-critical failover solutions. So how do we get there? You know, again, 2 ways, right? With a VMware environment or virtualized environment, you would typically see what's called metro clustering. Basically, it's the same as that VMware high availability we talked about, but now since you've got 2 data centers, and again, typically this is, you know, on a campus because you got to have dedicated links between the 2 data centers for the high-speed transfers of the database and accesses and all that. But the difference is you got to replicate the storage, right? Remember, with VMware, you got a storage solution that you have to use. So with that, we've certified OpenE, which is a company that makes storage clustering software that replicates the storage between the two data centers. So again, that's locally sourced, but what happens there is you got two data centers with two EXI hosts at each center. You've got the storage at each center. You got your users. Now you could go one step further. Is if you want to, you could add NEC's fault tolerance server to give you redundancy within the data center, as well as then the failover between the two data centers. So again, it just depends on what level of redundancy and failover you want. And this is just typically a picture of what we're talking about. Is if the two data centers all connected up with the two EXI hosts, the two storage locations. If you lose, for example, that 9500 host, the VMware host, all the applications, the 9500, everything moves over to the second data center. It restarts on that second data center and keeps the network up and running. So that's what we talk about. Yes.
A question on the UM8700. Because of the licensing, with the way AVST licenses the 8700, it's a USB anywhere dongle. So if I have it in a different data center, that kind of becomes an issue.
Right. So with the UM8700 now, there's also software licensing where you can actually license it. As long as you got an internet connection, you can license it in the cloud, where you wouldn't need that USB anywhere.
Is that something that came out?
Walter, we tried that, but because of their software solution did not support, I think it's called vMotion or something like that. So we had to go back to hardware dongles. But if we go with the default NEC FT servers where everything would be all in one, then we could actually, it'd be like our own virtual environment. So we wouldn't need to worry about vMotion or anything like that. We could go back to the software-based licensing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
But back to Walter's point, just real quick.
Yeah.
Being that the USB Anywhere, we do have 3 keys because we have never fail, and we could take out the never fail and put the second hardware dongle on the second data center if we wanted to.
True. Right, to keep that EXI host up and running over there. Yep, that could be done too. I'll show you one thing also. We have a new solution as well for the UM8700 coming up here. We'll talk about that as well. And we'll have to find out how that USB Anywhere will play into that, but we'll talk about that one. Let me talk about the geographic redundancy. With the introduction of the NEC 9500, we now have introduced geographic redundancy, which is telephony-based. What we mean by that is, what if I'm an appliance-based system? I mean, it's all great with the VMware that you can have VMware clustering and, this virtualized instance. If you lose it, it goes over to another data center. But I don't want to go, virtualized. I like it appliance-based. I want to keep it tried and true appliance-based. Well, we've introduced what's called geographic redundancy, and in simple terms, what we're doing is actually taking your 9500. You'll have an active 9500 at your main operating location, at your main system, and you'll have another 9500. It could be appliance-based or virtualized, it doesn't matter, sitting there in standby mode, ready to take over the network. You can actually have up to 7 sites. So it's an active standby deployment of your 9500s. And each site is fully duplicated. Basically, that 9500 database that's sitting there at that main location is duplicated across all the redundant, geo-redundant nodes. And of course, the UC Unified Met, the applications are dependent on what they can or can't do. Example like the 8700 we just talked about. But what it does is there's a routine health check. The redundant, the backup 9500, if you will, keeps on doing a health check. Are you there? Are you there? If it notices that something's wrong, then it kicks in and becomes the main site, right? It becomes the primary site. Now, the beauty of this is that you can actually still have that, same thing we talked about earlier, local redundancy. You can still have that dual CPU, dual memory, dual power supplies, all that at each site, and still have that failover. And again, the nice thing about this, it doesn't rely on VMware, HA, or storage clustering. You don't need to have that dedicated high-speed VLAN subnetting all to do the 2 clustering stuff. This is typically, or basically kind of like the SRMGC application on steroids, if you want to look at it that way. You know, it duplicates the full 9500 database and services. So, you know, pictorially what we're talking about, you know, it's under normal operations. Your main 9500 has all your IP devices, your IP stations, UG50s, SIP trunking, all that registered to the main site. And then what would happen is if the health check detects that there's a problem with the main site, that standby site, whichever priority, you set up priorities. You know, site A, site B, site C becomes your priority 1, 2, 3. And the secondary will kick in. So if you lose that main site, the secondary kicks in, all of the IP phones and UG50s and, you know, SIP trunking re-registers with that redundant site, and the network survives via that second one. So again, that's called the, you know, geo-redundancy solution, where you can make this appliance-based and or virtualized, right? It doesn't matter. You do have that choice of being a hybrid solution if you want to do that. And kind of, you know, leads us to the applications continuity, right? So with applications, to keep it up and running, this is kind of what, you know, I was going to talk about, Eric, is that, you know, NEC offers what's called Express Cluster. It's kind of like VMware, you know, HA, but what it does is basically it's mirror disk imaging. It's taking a server and its applications and data and mirroring it to another server and hard drive. Of course, you can always do the fault tolerant, you know, as you mentioned, being able to do the 5 nines and loading that UM8700 on a fault tolerant dual CPU, dual server, dual power supply load thing. Or with express clustering, being able to duplicate that across a LAN or a WAN. So we've just certified the UM8700 with this solution, right? So as you know, with the, you kind of mentioned, you know, with the never fail solution, that's what's available today. But a lower cost and even a more reliable solution with the express clustering is introduced now with the UM8700, where it does a primary and secondary fallover. You know, that just like express clustering is doing the continuous data mirroring. Its heartbeat is going back and forth, checking, you know, is the primary good? Is the primary good? If not, the DR side kicks in and continues running there, because you do have the full SQL database replicated, all the messages replicated, and you know, even it monitors even the services within that server to see if it's up and running to make it fail over. So that's another, you know, that's a different solution that we do now have for the UM8700. Now, you know, this definitely will work with that software-based licensing, but with the USB anywhere in the dongle, you know, that will probably come into play as well, because you are, you know, looking at 2 different servers in that solution. Okay, so, you know, bringing it all together, when we talk about, you know, a lot of things from, you know, redundancy, failover, local survivability. So, you know, how do I get there? You know, so a lot of customers, a lot of you guys have an 8500 running, you know, up to today. As long as your 8500 is a CPO2 and you have the 8 gig memories, you know, and things are good for the 8500 up to, you know, latest and greatest hardware on that, you can simply upgrade to a 9500, what we call, it's really called a service pack, right? You're taking that 8500 software and changing it over to the 9500 software and licensing, and now you've become a 9500. At that point, you can deploy the SIP trunkings on a VMware instance if you want. Of course, you know, the main 9500 is all your primary services for your IP stations and gateways, but you know, once you're up to a 9500, then you can, you know, deploy that geo-redundancy that we talked about, right? You can now have a remote site, maybe a data center. Again, the beauty of this is you can have that as a VMware instance, right? If you want to virtualize that second 9500 as a backup, you could do that. Keep your main site appliance-based, and then have your secondary geo-redundant site a virtualized. So in the case that you lose that CPU, you know, all your IP stations and IP gateways would re-register with that secondary virtualized instance. But, you know, we do have customers say, well, what, you know, I want to go fully virtualized. I want to, you know, get rid of all the TDM, GC chassis. You know, I want to go all IP, my whole network. How do I get there? There is a solution. You can transform your network. Again, you start with your 8500 and CPO2s, but in this case, instead of upgrading that CPO2 appliance to the 9500, you know, brains, what you're going to do is we do have a solution, what we call remote node over IP, or UMGI, that basically you can spin up the virtualized 9500 in the data center, And the control, that becomes the brains of the system, and you control that CPO2 or that remote node over IP, that TDM, with all its gateway chassis and PIMs. So it's still a single system image, just controlled by that main 9500, for example, in your data center that, could be virtualized, if that's your initiative there to go all virtualized. And of course, all your IP stations and IP gateways register with that 9500. And then once you do that, of course, you can, then deploy your secondary sites, right? You can do it whether you do it with the VMware clustering solution or VMware HA or even the geo-redundant. You can now have a secondary site as your backup. And then more importantly, once you get rid of all your digital analog PRIs and convert them, either to IP or convert them through the UG50, you still have a CPO2 you could take advantage of, and you can make that the tertiary side of the geo-redundant, right? Remember we talked about being able to have up to 7 locations in the backup environment. So again, you can convert this thing from traditional TDM analog all the way over to pure IP in a virtualized environment. Again, the beauty of that is at your pace and as you need to. So with that, trying to get here in time. Pretty much the summary is that, hopefully you can see that we've done a lot of work in the business continuity capability, right? But there's a lot of flexibility in virtualization, redundancy, and failover. And I think the key there is that, being able to take NEC's unique expertise in providing both IT solutions and UC solutions integrated to make this all happen, in a nice cohesive way, right? And of course, with the 115 years of NEC history, a lot of innovation there. So with that, I think I am done, and hopefully try to get that all in before the hour kicks in.
Great job, Lou. Great job. At this time, we'll just kind of open it up for questions. Hopefully that is what you wanted to hear. It was a little bit more in-depth on the redundancy virtualization. So let's open it up for any questions. Anybody have any questions of their specific needs or network?
And I'll ask, is Mark, were you able to join Mark Masurk? Yeah, he might not. His wife was, I think, having surgery, so he may not have been able to join. So I'll find out on that question for you, Walter, about the NFAS capabilities on UG50 and where we stand on that.
All right. No questions?
I didn't have any.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? We'll wrap it up. Just tell everybody Happy Halloween. Have a great time. And then also, we probably won't have another call until after. So for all the veterans out there, Happy Veterans Day, and thank you very much for your service, man. We appreciate it. All right. Y'all have a great weekend.
You too.
You too.
Take care.
Thanks, Lou.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.